Well, thank you so much for coming on today, John. It's really nice to have someone from the local Hunter area where I've just moved come on and talk about design.
Oh, pleased to be invited.
Yeah,
Thanks for the opportunity.
no worries. Yeah, just a bit of background. I met John recently. He reached out to me and we went and had a coffee, to talk about design, a fellow interest. And yeah, thought, why not come on the podcast? John's been working in design for many years, industrial design, and worked in Sydney. And now he's moved back to the Hunter, where you're originally from Newcastle, right?
I'm originally from Port Macquarie, actually,
Upper
so
Macquarie.
mid-north coast.
Close to there, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
originally from this area, moved back to work. Now he's working at the Melt, and yeah, interested to hear what he thinks about all these topics we've got lined up.
yeah, excellent. Oh, well, hit me with them, and I'll do my best.
Maybe just to start off, would you like to talk about your background in industrial design? I know you've worked for a range of different companies over the years.
Yep. Yeah, so I think I left university at 2004. Had a bit of a 6-month break to figure out what opportunities were out there, and I guess wanted to try and remain local to the Hunter region,
Yep.
primarily because it's a great place. And I met my fiance, or now wife, here, so I didn't really want to upend and move.
Mm.
So I started out like a lot of industrial designers do out of university to maintain employment locally, and went to an engineering firm. So that was RPC Technologies. They specialised in products for the rail industry. Um, and then I actually went from there to shop fitting, which was vastly different. So doing interior design for retail and commercial interiors. Um, and then made the jump to another company called Bradkin Engineering through a friend who had recommended the job. And so I went from designing things out of MDF to designing things out of 12, 16 millimeter thick steel. So that was a
Bit of a jump.
massive change. But after 5 years, I think I could say that I gave it a pretty good crack, and then moved into what was probably my first real job in a design for commercial retail like purchased products with Rhino-Rack Australia.
No, awesome.
So the next role was at Rhino-Rack Australia, and that was primarily focused on automotive, which is a real love of mine, and outdoor products for, I guess, lifestyle, etc.
Yeah, okay.
I think the thing with that job is it was the first role where I was really doing what I felt like was an undiluted version of industrial design.
Mm.
It really had all of the elements of dealing with aesthetics, function, and it needed to work in conjunction with other products as well, like the vehicles that they were being fitted on. So with that role, I had to sacrifice, unfortunately, living full time in Newcastle, and had to commute
Mm.
to Sydney and stay down a few days of the week. So I guess with anything, I think that was a really good example to me that if you really want to do something, you have to sometimes give up
Mm.
things in other areas potentially.
Yeah.
So from there, I guess it was sort of a few roles that I've jumped between as work became available. So I think from working at places like Barley Engineering or Orica, and then some time spent in consultancies at Design Anthology and now the Melt, I would say diverse is the best way to describe my experience.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I suppose as a designer, or any professional, sometimes you feel like moving from workplace to workplace can make your CV look a bit um all over the shop, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, in design specifically, I suppose get the advantage of that is you get a more of a breadth of experience opposed to just working at one business or a couple of businesses. Yeah.
I think consultancy work is by definition very much being able to transition between projects that may or may not be similar
Mm.
in their manufacture or the product type. Could be engineering, and then next minute you could be doing something for, say, a medical or a product lifestyle type thing. So to be able to be flexible enough
Mm.
usually only comes with experience, sort of doing different things, and with that breadth of experience, you'll be able to jump between and wear different hats more regularly.
Oh, cool. So you don't think that you think most businesses see that as an addition these days, versus like unreliability?
No, I think if you have a story or a narrative that lends itself to be able to understand.
Mm.
So with the ebb and flow of work locally, there's redundancies that sometimes come about, and I've unfortunately been subject to one of those in my time.
Mm.
And I just look at that as just being an opportunity to do something different. So although it is frustrating,
Mm.
um, things that you can't control, I guess you got to be able to somehow look at it from a glass half full perspective and see, well, I don't know, if it's not going to work in this, say, role, there's going to be something else out there if I look and keep my ears open. And
Yeah.
that's the experience I've had. And I guess with a good tenure of time spent working in places like sort of more than 6 months, I'd say you wouldn't want to do too many roles where you're like doing 6 months to 6 months to 6 months.
Yeah.
That possibly wouldn't be a good idea.
Lemonoosh. In case you haven't heard of them, they're a design organization that helps educate designers all around the world so they can stay up to date with the latest software needs so that they can be competitive in this overly competitive design landscape. Full disclosure, I was provided this software free of charge to give my honest, unbiased review of the product. Personally, I found this course very beneficial. Before the course started, I had absolutely no knowledge of Rhino. I'd never opened the software before. I went from that to having a good grasp of the fundamental skills of Rhino and moving on to the more complex skills towards the end of my experience with Lemonoosh. Currently, I've just passed the first major portion of the course and I've already a solid grasp on the software. The course walks you through the basic tools, then slowly progresses you onto the more complex tool set of Rhino. My only critique would be that the tutorials are using macOS, and personally I use Windows, which initially was somewhat confusing as there are differences between the macOS version of Rhino versus the Windows version. But I contacted the Lemonoosh support and they were very helpful and got me back on track, and I haven't had any issues since. In the Rhino course, you will start modeling a basic mock-up pod, then moving on to fully modeling the Nintendo Switch. Next, modeling the Bang & Olufsen Bayo Play speaker, a Google concept, and finally, using the new sub-D tools to model a pair of sunglasses. This comprehensive course is a good step forward in your Rhino learning experience and has given me the tools to work on some key projects that I was looking to move on to once I learned Rhino. Lemonoosh also offers a range of other courses for software such as Keyshot, Grasshopper, Photoshop for industrial designers, and much more. If you're interested, check out the affiliate link in the description, and a small portion will go back to me to help fund the podcast and bring it to the next level. Thank you. Now back to the podcast. Yeah, to move on from that, maybe your current role at the Melt. I went and checked out the place the other day, and it's a really awesome little spot you got going on there in the hospital.
Yeah.
Operating out the back of the hospital. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
discuss what the Melt is all about and what your role at the Melt entails.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The melt's really interesting because it almost in the first 6 months I was there, it really sort of unraveled and became more apparent as to what the melt is, what it does, and where I fit within the scheme of things. So initially they were after an industrial designer,
Yep.
check. And I think it was primarily, in my mind, a focus on the startup investment, which the Melt is a VC, a venture capital investment fund.
Yep.
I would be sidelining, walking the journey with the founder, doing I guess, hardware or product development of whatever their given product is.
Yep.
But it sort of turned into being that, and also work with corporates to help unlock any of that trapped IP that sometimes within large corporations has the issue of sort of being sort of pushed down and down to a time that will probably never come because they're always waiting for that moment when they're not as busy.
Yeah.
So the Melt uses myself to inject into the business. So for instance, I'm doing a project with CSIRO at the moment, which is sort of similar
Yep.
set of circumstances, and allows me to work on something while they go about their day to day. business, and then I can be developing and producing the R&D efforts in the background.
Yeah.
So, and it's good because I am involved with work with founders and startups, but I'm also got this corporate element as well, which I've got a lot of background in, obviously from that experience I mentioned.
Yeah. No, it sounds like an interesting experience, quite diverse. And I suppose in a way because it's such a small little operation, you kind of have your own creative license, I suppose, to some degree.
And I think with there only being, say, 5 or 6 of us,
Yep.
it really needs the the guys who own the melt need me to be able to steer my own ship to a degree. Like obviously, still with a degree of answerability to them, but I think for the most part, I'm left to my own devices, and unless there's a real problem, which it hasn't thankfully yet been that situation, all the outcomes are celebrated when we finalise projects and get them across the line,
Awesome. Yeah.
which is good.
Well, yeah, well, maybe to move on from that, just to discuss the projects that Melt takes on. I understand they have some interesting projects at the moment, with the CSIRO, but also in the mining sector.
Yep.
Could you discuss maybe, yeah, just the types of projects they take on and the scope of,
Yeah. So
yeah.
so as far as investment goes, we've got a Melt Ventures fund, is what it's called. The fund, I think it's $15 million at its last cap raising. It was, and it is, sorry, really focused on 3 things. So, clean technologies, advanced manufacturing, and like that sort of industry, like, yeah, the industry 4.0,
Yep.
next level of manufacturing. And the focus really is all hardware. It's all hardware focused. So, as an industrial designer who designs hardware, yeah, there's opportunity there to add value to the investment. So I've done some work with a local company called Allegro Energy. We're invested in that company, but also they need certain things along the way, be it a 3D print or something designed to help them out with, say, their R&D journey. And that's where I can step in and sort of help out. And keep it all sort of in-house to the melt rather than having to have an additional consultancy operating on the side.
Yep. Yeah.
That does happen in some cases if it's a really complicated project where it needs more than just, say, one person like myself. But I can still be there to consult and sort of add my 2 cents worth, so to speak, along the way.
Yeah. That sounds interesting. You mentioned
Mm.
Industry 4.0. I work in, as you know, I work in the manufacturing industry in Newcastle. And Newcastle is an interesting place because it's founded in mining, but has kind of developed into this whole other entity now, centered around manufacturing and has pretty significant manufacturing processes considering its scale.
Yep.
How do you see that the Industry 4.0 model will factor into the future of Newcastle?
Yeah, I feel like the understanding of the way things can be done with more technological focus.
Yep.
It'll obviously take time it's time and money to adopt, but our Melt Advanced Manufacturing Centre in Muswellbrook, which has just been recently opened, is a prime example where you can have some of the most world-class top-level 3D printers and manufacturing ability local to an area like the Upper Hunter, which I think up until recently didn't even have a CNC machine in the whole local area. So we've got like a 4-axis or a 5-axis CNC, a CNC lathe, 3 variations of printers from metal, the only metal printer local, a carbon fiber nylon printer. So there's, I guess, from that advanced manufacturing angle, that particular center is sort of shining a light on some of these areas to help others to be able to see that, okay, well, if I had my own printer, I could expedite the production of or prototyping of We've got a little pick and place robot up there, which people can come in and be trained to sort of utilize some of that, I guess, next level thinking about how they could maybe automate areas of the business that potentially are quite repetitious or don't really need to have that human element or interface.
Yep.
So with that, I think I feel lucky to be able to work for a company where we're actually moving forward into from that perspective of manufacturing techniques or manufacturing methodologies, trying to sort of get the jump on that local ability to be able to experience it at least, rather than having to contact, say, the wholesaler or something. We can actually be that conduit of the information,
Yeah, it's interesting.
which is good.
It does seem like a lot of Newcastle does operate off, more classic manufacturing techniques. But it's interesting, as you're saying, that the melt's kind of bringing in that more future focused manufacturing technique.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of companies around too that are doing a lot of IoT sensing and stuff like that, which adds real-time metrics to manufacturing as well, understanding of like what machines are doing, whether or not there's any failure points, and they can be addressed quickly.
Yep.
So I think a lot of that type of stuff seems to be being adopted
Yep.
in this area as well. And just a bit of a better understanding of what that real-time metrics and real-time information can do to help productivities, help downtimes, lost time from machines breaking down and stuff like that. So I've been lucky enough to be sort of like either working sideline to or have worked with other companies that do some pretty cool tech as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a future question. I had a future question about big data, but I suppose this kind of ties into this, like data collection to improve manufacturing, manufacturing, but also design. How do you think that's going to factor into the future of our field?
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, I don't feel like I'm probably an authority enough in the space to be able to give any affirmative answer, to be honest.
Yep.
I think information's great to have, but I think from a designer's perspective, our skill is to reach out, research, and obtain data. Not necessarily. I feel like from an engineering perspective, that's probably something that's got more validity when they're doing their like their analyses for FEA, etc. And they know strains and stresses that are being put on products, and understand the reasons why they're, say, failing. I think from a designer's perspective, it's about knowing who to reach out to when you're unsure.
Yep.
That's from my experience. Like the designer, I think, is the what's the saying? You kind of jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah.
I think we definitely master things, but we have to be like spread across a large range of different industries and info. So I think just a really good dose of curiosity is a really good thing for a designer to have in all elements.
Yeah. Just wanting to learn more.
Yeah, even like stuff I don't even know why. Like my wife always jokes and says, "Oh, you'd be great at trivia. You know a whole heap of really unimportant, like unnecessary things." And it's like, well, like my job is to absorb.
Yeah.
So, well, which I think is a really, I think from the perspective of the designer as a job, it's a really a real luxury to be able to have that as a main factor of our role, because you become exposed to so many different things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Design as a whole in the Hunter Valley, and in Newcastle and even the Central Coast kind of area. How do you think that's going to develop, and what developments have you noticed in your time here?
So my first job I got as an industrial designer because a friend of mine was working there, and this company, RPC Technologies, was one of the first companies that I really knew of that understood what design could offer in conjunction with your normal engineering functions,
Yep.
which I think, say 20 years ago, was probably pretty forward thinking.
Mm.
That company had a pretty good relationship with the university's industrial design course, and through that fed through a few industrial designers over like the time that I was there.
Mm.
And it was more than just doing drafting. There was conceptualization, understanding of like model making, like doing like first article prototyping, stuff
Mm.
like that, which, as you know, being an industrial designer is all key skills to be able to bring with you along your career journey. So yeah, I think although I didn't foresee trains and working in that industry as something that I was expecting I would fall into, to stay local, you got to be able to, I guess, redefine your expectation on what you feel like industrial design is, and sort of pick from that out of the jobs that are at hand. So you see a lot of jobs like mechanical drafters, CAD drafter, CAD designer, etc., etc.
Mm.
And I think ID feeds into all of those roles
Mm.
to a degree.
Yeah.
But as far, like, to add to your latter part of the question, I think there's been a real understanding that from a commercial aspect, um, there's real benefits to having designers involved in product development,
Yep.
be it from, say, lean manufacturing techniques and understanding about that designing for manufacture,
Mm.
um, or just thinking of clever ways to do things that, say, you're using like parts, or um, figuring out, I guess, how something could work with the least amount of components rather than over designing something.
Mm. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting how the just having simply design thinking in a business can really change the trajectory of the business, and also just like the reliance on outer organizations, like the benefit of actually having an in-house design team versus
Mm.
outsourcing everything. Like even in the business I'm working in at the moment, like you really see the designers who've worked there a long time, they understand all the processes and they can easily design for the processes because they know exactly how Opalescent would do it, not just how
Yeah, exactly.
six signage company could do it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that benefit of just having even an in-house designer, versus always hiring consultancies can be really beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also one of the best reasons for in-house design and engineering is the ability to keep internal the intellectual property that you're creating.
Yeah.
I've seen it a lot of times in businesses where, due to the sheer size of a project, or this distribution of skills that need to be found to be able to do a job, that a lot of contractors will come on, do the job, and then they'll disappear and take all of that experience and design knowledge
Mm.
with them,
Yep.
which then leaves that company in the same position they were before the project started, which is, although they have the product, some of those learnings have exited the building,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's the value of keeping workers around and like in putting investment into the workers is that they develop those skills and they develop the knowledge around what worked in the past. Um,
Yes.
and can kind of like lead that on into the future team. I suppose like when you see a business that like in the past I've worked for organizations that have kind of churned through workers and you kind of lose that. Like when you always have new
Yeah.
workers, you get new taste on work regularly, which is nice. Like different headspaces from different organizations and different experiences. But you lose that like deep knowledge of what worked in the past and how is the best practice for that organization.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing you lose is, especially with, say, a well ingrained like quality team. And
Mm.
I felt like at Bradkin Engineering we had that exact set of circumstances where there was probably 10 of us who really, really collectively knew how to collaborate and get the best out of each other, and also for the project and the company.
Yep.
And everything felt like it ran almost like clockwork, which was really good. And I think it was good because everyone had a decent amount of experience. That, as you mentioned before, that ability to learn from your past experiences was all there in the building. and everyone felt like that they could anything they would sort of add value to into the discussion was listened to, which I think is really good, because it felt like that everyone had equal amount of experience to be able to really give their own personal sort of standpoint on, say, a decision or a direction.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Move on from that. You've worked in consultancies and you've worked in in-house roles. What major benefits have you seen from the two different experiences, and what would you recommend for people who are looking to, move on? Should they focus on getting in-house experience or consultancy experience?
I guess each of them have being vastly different. Each of them have their own pros and cons, I would say.
Yep.
Working for in-house, like I'll use Rhino-Rack as probably a good example. You get to be able to work on and probably become a bit of a subject matter expert in one particular area.
Yep.
Which is good, because I guess over a course of years, you start to feel like it's a bit of muscle memory, it's although you're iterating on, say, previous designs that have been like commercially successful, you, I guess, feel like you're a part of a bigger something where you're all sort of working towards that common goal of collectively making the product selection the best it can be, and also successfully commercially as much as it can be. So I think there's like it's almost like feels like a bit of a family, like an engineering family, I think is the way I felt when we were working there. We'd all work collaboratively quite well together. And I think with that, you're also, over a course of years, feel like you become confident to make decisions. Probably the negative is you don't get the diversity that you get in a consultancy. So I would be, to come straight out of uni and go into like pure consultancy work, I think would be unnerving, because you just don't have that back catalogue of hits to be able to draw from to come up with like new innovative ideas all the time. And I feel like consultancies, you've got a lot of blank paper like starts, where you've got to come up with something from an idea that's new and fresh. And I guess kind of blow the minds of your customer and really bring to life what it is that they've envisaged in their mind was the final product. To do that without any experience in any other sort of diverse range of roles I think it'd be the challenge. But the positive of working for a consultancy is the diversity, obviously, as well. Vast experience across lots of different areas, lots of different clients, lots of different manufacturing techniques. So it's a bit of a baptism of fire, I think, if you were to start out of uni into that sort of environment. So, yeah, I guess there's like pros and cons. If you like to sort of feel like you get really good at doing sort of one range of things, I'd say in-house is always a really good option. But if you love to dip your toes into the sea of diversity, I think doing consultancy work's really good, because you only look at like some of the big consultancies like D&I or Tiller or 4Design, like the breadth of their offerings that they have designed and produced and commercialized is quite vast.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you're at uni, everyone wants to go into a consultancy. I feel like most people you talk to, they're like, oh, I'm planning to apply for this consultancy. But the reality is, like, a lot of consultancies just won't take graduates on, because for them, that they need someone to have that experience, to have the previous experience in organizations that they can draw from. That's the value that they compose. And it's like a graduate going into a consultancy is going to have to basically be trained in almost everything from the ground up.
And they also don't want to just deliver coffees to say to the already existing staff. You want to feel like you're adding value, don't you? Yeah,
exactly. So I think maybe it's like a misconception put in in the educational field. I don't know, but that, like, I mean, at uni you're kind of trained on this like idealistic concept of design which is pretty centered to what a consultancy would provide. And I think that's
Yeah.
why people are more directed towards that. Um, but like maybe we should be promoting that, that's not necessarily the benefit, the most effective way to go into a career. And it might be better to go and get external experience.
Yeah, well, I think when the university course for industrial design was running locally in Newcastle, one of the things that it didn't really have was an industry experience program.
Mm.
And I think with that, you would give the student the ability to understand like what the real world life of an industrial designer is, and the implications of your decisions, and how they can be commercially advantageous. But if you are not as detail orientated as you should be, could be disastrous,
Mm.
worst case. And I think it's good to be able to really get an understanding for the weight of, say, getting $100,000 tool made for injection molding, or a $5,000 extrusion tool, or something like. There's lots of decisions that all in theory sound like really easy,
Mm.
but when someone's saying the hopes and dreams of this next product rely on you making the right decisions, like that's unnerving.
Mm.
So I think that ability to step into the world of business and a company that needs or has an understanding of how design helps in their commercial success is really beneficial for students. So I
Mm.
know engineers do it. Maybe I think it's a 400-hour component to the degree. And I
Yep.
think for design, I think it's really important as well, because being able to understand how you fit into the scheme of it with engineering and the other business facets
Mm.
is important too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's something that should be included in a course. We've spoken about it in the podcast before, but um, yeah, like having that industry experience makes you way more prepared for that first job because you kind of have an idea of what to expect,
Yeah,
on the basic level, but even just to learn about how to communicate with other professionals that in that area and like what is required of you as a designer and things like that. Like these
yeah.
that you won't really get unless you have that industry experience. You're not going to get that at university,
Oh,
you
as
know?
simple as writing a succinct email
Yeah.
to
Yeah, email
get your
editor.
point across without sounding like a newbie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are all of those things you kind of get once you've got your stride,
Mm.
it's fine. I think if you could uh, hit the ground running off the backside of doing your final year of your degree, you're building already relationships with people in industry that
Mm.
may or may not be invaluable. So, and
Yeah.
and talk, like you sort of mentioned about what my opinion was on industry locally and their understanding of what design can add to. I think there's never been more than now an understanding of the importance of good design within in a business,
Mm.
and just how engineering and design sort of really fit hand in hand.
Yeah. The
And I
integration.
think and I think with that, it's good in an area where engineering has been predominantly the key industry or a key career path. Yeah, so I guess this is real industry that understanding that, you know what, industrial design isn't just about coloring in or cutting and pasting, as my wife used to joke about. It's really about making some like crucial decisions about how it is, say, a person interacts with the design, like safety elements, manufacturing elements, and using that, as you mentioned, design thinking methodologies to come up with the best solutions.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the things that I feel like I never anticipated um going into is how much, pressure is on us in a way, like not necessarily in a bad way, but we have the tools to make serious like changes in a product. We can seriously,
Mm,
like a lot of pressure is on us to make it work, you know what I mean? And like it's the same
yeah,
for engineers, but there are parts of business where less pressure is on that role. Whereas like we kind of have a lot of pressure to make this, ultimately work in the end. And like it's
Yeah.
good you learn so quickly, I feel like, when you're under that kind of pressure. But initially it is like trial by fire, as you mentioned. It kind of feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, big time. And I think back to that discussion about consultancy versus in-house,
Mm,
I think the really good thing about in-house, say engineering departments,
mm,
is there's this real inbuilt, especially the businesses that are more developed, an inbuilt system of checks and balances
mm,
to ensure that there is a few levels of, I guess, authority where the buck stops and
mm.
a decision is either made yay or nay to the design and its intent being correct and fit to be manufactured or suitable to be designed, prototyped, and commercialized. Whereas I think with consultancy work, I've seen it a lot of times where the design happens and it gets passed off to, say, the customer to do the manufacturing, etc., and it falls over
Yep.
and it doesn't actually see the light of day because of other unforeseeable factors. So I guess that's where the melt's really sort of a bit different, where it's really part of the journey to be held accountable to actually get the product to be a commercial success.
Yep.
One, the investment part, it's not obviously wise to invest in something that you can't get designed to a point where it's actually commercially viable.
Mm,
And two, with that, you can then walk the journey with the founder to iterate and and also get the design to be massaged to be the best version of whatever it can be,
mm,
like V1, V2, V3 to V4, to hopefully being a product which is standalone and doesn't need to have any more sort of further work done to it.
mm. Yeah, I mean, engineers I've met have criticized like designers I mean, to me they criticize designers as not understanding how things are actually made. But like as you're
Yeah.
saying, there are significant parts of design where you kind of have to actually know how it's going to be made because you're working in that space, and manufacturing is one of them. And I mean, I suppose the
Yep.
benefit of working in that industry is you kind of understand actually how it's going to be made all the way to the point of manufacturing, not just you know a rough idea of how it's going to be done, and then the manufacturing company changes it at the end. Um,
Yeah.
adjust it. You see it all the way to production, and yeah, it's
So
kind
I think one of the real keys, I was just sort of thinking about like that startup mentorship
of.
role of a designer
Mm,
is about trying to keep design intent correct,
mm,
although you're scaling the product through the process of small to large scale manufacturing.
mm,
Um, it doesn't necessarily mean that the way you make it at low quantity will be the same way you make it at mass production quantities.
yep.
So to try and keep the intent of the design sound and as expected as you scale through is a really challenging process, because injection molding is like a big capital investment into tooling, etc.
Yep.
But if you were to make, say, the same product, but only want to make 50 of them,
Mm,
things like vacuum cast plastic molding and stuff like that is potentially a way you could get the same intent, but using different techniques. And you've got to understand and know that these even exist,
yep.
which is the challenge, because there's so many ways that things can be made.
Mm,
Um, and that's where the experience piece comes in, I think, too.
yeah. Um, 3D printing, you've mentioned it already. It's obviously been up and coming in the industry. What future do you see for 3D printing? Do you think it's going to be the next amazing manufacturing technique that's going to change the world, or do you think it's just going to fill a role in the current manufacturing industry?
Well, I guess obviously now it fills the role of like rapid iteration
Yep.
to be able to design in a way where you don't, I guess, get so concerned about every detail because you know that that could maybe be solved in your second print.
Mm,
If you were to say not print in, like, say if you like rewound, say 20, 30 years, and you've designed it and then say prototyped it out of timber or something, and then you've gone to say injection molded tooling,
Hmm.
um, you would want to be very sure that everything was like bang on.
Hmm.
I think kind of like digital cameras have changed the way people think about taking a photo.
Hmm.
I feel like the uh, the printing 3D printing process has allowed us to be maybe a little bit more fluid with our ideas and less worried about like what if it fails or what if it doesn't work,
Yep.
because you could just like manipulate it in your model and then print it again. And as the printers are getting faster, like this new bamboo printers that are really getting glowing reviews, they're printing at like 600 millimeters per. I don't know. There's like I can't don't quote me on the stats, but they're fast. So
Yeah.
I think that rapid ability to replicate or iterate
Hmm.
is really, I feel, and I know it's already happening in the automotive industry and alike, is that this will take maybe place of potentially lower run injection molded
Hmm.
products where we don't have to invest in tooling, you just invest in a printer.
Yep.
Don't quote me on it,
Hmm.
but it makes sense as something gets faster and something gets cheaper.
Yep.
We start to wonder where one will become more of a, I guess, a cost effective way to do it rather than having to go down the path of traditional methods.
Yeah. It's hard to picture a day when 3D printing will ever be as fast as injection molding. But as you're saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be if it fills a need of lower volumes. Like, the faster
Yeah.
processes for high volumes will still be there, but lower volumes, 3D printing might tend itself better to that.
Well, I think with things like generative design and stuff like that coming about, which like realistically doesn't lend itself to being 3D printed.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's sort of an industry 4.0 example as well, where that AI crossing over with like correct inputs into a program will give designs that potentially aren't what we would have naturally have come up with ourselves. So I don't know if you've seen, like I follow a lot of cycling stuff and cars,
Yep.
and there's lots of products where generative design has been put into the commercial space.
Mm.
Would be it like with a titanium printings or things like that, where uh, and some of them look such like almost alien like
Mm.
structures. The computer has come up with all of the bits and pieces that make it fit for purpose, but I can't see how you could mold it using traditional methods.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, like when you think about the concept of 3D printing, you couldn't even perceive something like that before it was created, like perceive that you could create a shape out of traditional meat.
Yeah,
And like I saw this thing years ago, about this alien thing, and this guy was like, how would this ship ever be made? And then like I saw this post on the bottom, it was like a video on YouTube, and the guy was like,
yeah,
2023 3D printing. And it's like exactly like you
yeah.
can't perceive something until it's right in front of you. And like it's just interesting watching the progression of technology and like even imagining what technology could be like in like 20, 30 years from now. Yeah.
Well, I think from like because you brought up printing as like a point,
Hmm.
I can only imagine it'll get faster,
Yeah.
and the rapid rate will just allow, I guess, print farms to be able to produce X amount per day or per second or minute, um, and do it in a way that if you did need to make a change. And I think too, talking about things like global distribution and stuff like that,
Hmm.
it's sort of come to like over COVID has shown that if you didn't need to rely on, say, it being, I don't know, injection molded in China and sent on a boat or a plane,
Yep.
and you could print it in your back workshop
Hmm.
and it'd be just as like efficient, effective, and fit for purpose,
Hmm.
we don't have to worry about those lead times or costs of shipping, which are getting higher. So I think there's a couple of real areas there which, as the speed and the quality um, goes up,
Yep.
we'll have some markets leaving traditional and moving to use, I think, those methods.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this kind of lends itself to the future of mass customization as well, I feel like.
Yeah,
As more consumers get 3D printers and get access to that technology, it could potentially mean that more customized designs for the user could be offered. Like, there's already been this
yeah,
3D printed shoes. Have you seen that? Like they like 3D
yeah,
scan someone's foot and then they create like a 3D printed shoe directly for that foot.
yeah. And this bespoke, I guess, human-centered customization.
Hmm.
Like a lot of people love a one of one. I think that's a lot of people. A lot of people boast that this is the one of.
Hmm.
This is the one of the one that no one else has got the same thing. And I think people really, um, they really find value in knowing that they have something no one else has.
Yep.
Like I remember at Rhino-Rack, if you would say we had a few influencers that you would give products to,
Hmm.
and they would be boasting on all of the forums about I've got the blah blah such and such that no one else has got yet. And
Hmm.
I think in the design world, it's not what I think the way that it should go,
Hmm.
but I feel like if it allows people to be more unique and more, I guess, expressive of their own personalities.
Yep.
Um, yeah, well, I guess it can't be a bad thing, can it?
Well, yeah, in a world where there's so many people, I mean, everyone just wants to be independent and be different, I suppose. And
Yeah,
we've seen like in business that that's no longer the Model T, way of design where you just have everything in black.
no. Yeah,
Um,
it's ironic though that I'm like your typical plain t-shirt, no slogans, pair of chinos, black Vans wearing guy. Everything I like to embody myself in is so devoid of any perceived design influence.
it seems like a thing with designers. I mean, I'm wearing like purple checkered shirt, which is a bit too flashy for our conversation.
I was going to say that.
But it seems like a thing with designers. Like every time you see a designer, they're just wearing like black shirt. It seems like a style.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's maybe it's the Zuckerberg angle where I'm too busy and I don't want to think about. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But what to put on? But I think I don't know. It's almost like you can't make a mistake if you just stick to
Yeah.
simplistic things in your life.
I mean, I
Like
think it kind of
I
comes.
know with cars. Sorry,
Oh, you go, you go.
I know with cars. Like obviously, this is where Tesla has made inroads. Is that they've taken a product, and Apple
Mm.
as well have taken products that potentially could be really, really, really complex
Yeah.
and are,
Mm.
but yet have come up with an aesthetic that is so simplistic in its
Mm.
uh, like in its form
Mm.
that it's like a real marrying. It's like a juxtaposition of a complicated technical electric product that looks simplistic and perfectly designed.
Mm. I suppose this kind of like comes back to the whole minimalistic trend that seems to have like swept the whole world. And some people these days, I see some things where people debate that it's like a bad trend and like some things should be more complicated than they are. Because like it's like minimalistic can sometimes sacrifice function in a way.
Yeah.
But like this kind of comes back to what you're saying, like it that future has kind of been brought along by people wanting to see less complicated, very complicated items as less complicated.
Yeah. And I think the user experience research that would have been put in behind in the background
Yep.
would have been so extensive.
Hmm.
Um, but I think too, there's also an angle where, and Steve Jobs is probably, and Elon Musk really good at this, is presenting the general population with something they didn't even know they needed yet.
Yeah.
And in a way, they didn't even know they would want it laid out.
Hmm.
So it's kind of that upper echelon of design, which is predictive of what people um, will buy without them even knowing they wanted to buy it yet. And
Hmm.
I think Apple gave like there's a couple of times in a row with like computers or phones, etc., where we were presented with products that we never even probably in our mind's eye
Mm.
thought could exist, like as a general average person.
Yep.
And I think the electric car, like what do they call them? Disruptors.
Mm. Yeah. And I think we will see more products like that in the future. Like I was talking to someone today about this and they were saying like, oh, imagine if we lived in an era in like the 80s where like there was so many things that hadn't been designed yet. But at the same time, like think about all the things I said to them, like think about all the things
Mm,
being designed in our time. Like those are still innovative ideas that have completely changed. Like there's always going to be
yeah.
new ideas. Like it's not like the ideas have ended and there's no more ideas left to come up with.
Well, I've heard some designer, some non like design people say, "How can we design anything more? Surely everything's been designed." So
Yeah.
I guess we should just give up now.
Yeah.
But
That's funny.
I think that, like the saying it goes, "There's nothing new under the sun." I think a lot of products are just like a rehash or a reinterpretation of things that are out there. But I think it's the truly innovative, disrupting products
Mm.
like your Airbnbs or your Ubers or your Apples or your Teslas that
Yep.
take an industry and shock everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's
it.
what interests me with design is the power that good design
Mm.
can have if it's used.
Used for good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, that comes into ethical design as well. Like what impact have you seen in your practice on the ethics of design and how can we steer our designs in that direction as designers?
I think it's important to obviously ask why it is that we need it, whatever this product is. It's a difficult one because at the level of being an employee, you're beholden to the powers that be to do your job, obviously.
Yep.
But I think from a consultancy level, there's definitely probably times when products would come across consultancies' desks that would possibly um, pause to consider whether or not you take that project on or design it with the angle that the intent is. So I think that designers have definitely a weight on their shoulders to ensure that the ethical nature of a product and its design is in the best interests of the population and the
Mm.
consumer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have the keys to the puzzle kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Human and machine integration is an interesting topic that I've been thinking about a lot in the past. And like that can be virtual integration, like VR, AR kind of thing. But
Yep.
also physical integration, like the whole Neuralink dilemma that Elon Musk has proposed. Um,
Yep.
you work with automation to some degree in manufacturing. How do you see human integration with machines and technology will change and develop in the coming years?
Um, yeah, I guess obviously as roles start to come about for jobs that we particularly didn't even know needed to exist,
Hmm.
maybe there's going to be an evolution where we well, they always talk about like these roles that is going to cease to exist in 10 to 20 years time in say news articles, etc., to get everybody fearing for their lives. I think definitely jobs with a repetitious nature, well, they're already the case.
Yeah.
Jobs where there is an obvious way of integrating robotics or machinery to probably do the job more accurately, efficiently, and cost effectively
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yep.
But I think there's definitely still jobs out there in design where, like with the advent of I guess everybody starts to get a little bit worried with like programs like Midjourney or Viscom, where they're sort of taking really complicated, say, Photoshop or CAD functionalities and turning them into something which can be just putting in a word explanatory and popping out like a result.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it's still invariably it's very important that we keep the human element
Mm,
there from the design perspective, because a lot of the times designs are collaboratively done, and through that collaboration comes these amazing results.
mm.
And I guess computers are less so collaborative and more so feed off input. Used to feed off inputs. Now they seem to be able to think for themselves. Terminator is near, unfortunately. But I think as far as design, especially with like designing for humans to interface with products, I actually haven't had any experience with having to do a design of something where it's, say, a machinery item to be used in field. The probably closest thing would have been work I did for SafeGauge, which was using IoT
Yep.
technologies to be able to extricate the human from a danger point, and then the machine that I collaborated with a couple of guys on does measuring of really, really small amounts
Mm,
while the machine's being operated. And the idea is to keep the operator out of harm's way, so the plant mechanic is a good distance away and can't get hurt. So I think with that, using tech, IoT, and products to be able to help keep people safe, help people to do their job, and not be put in harm's way is really, really, really effective way of using design and technology.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Moving on with 3D printing, you have a insanely nice 3D printer in the office you're in.
Yep.
With resin printing, obviously there's a lot more capabilities than for FDM, and like it seems like there's more of a future there. What changes do you think material science will have on the future of design and like the kind of designs we can actually conceptualize as material science factors more into 3D printing?
I think being a cyclist, titanium was always like the golden
Yeah.
material to aim to want to purchase a bike made of,
Mm,
and to see that it can be made now with a lot more freedom with like shapes and form is really exciting.
yep.
But I think too, with the materials that, say, the Mark Forged Metal X that we've got at Musselbrook,
Mm,
it can do everything from like Inconel, which is like a high heat temperature like alloy,
yep.
titanium, stainless, copper. So the opening up of like your opportunities for designing products using metallic materials to gain strength where required, and not and having no material where not required,
Mm,
is really good for optimizing products and getting the best, lightest weight. You can actually hollow out the structure and have it only a skin around the exterior, so you're able to do a lot of remarkable uh, things through 3D printing.
mm,
I think the resin printing, like the multi-jet fusion printer that we've got here at the J Hill,
yep.
it's I think in the next level of its own. So it's particularly suitable for medical 3D printing, and I think the next steps will be like your bio printing, where you're able to do like in person, like prints of like parts that could go inside people. And
Yep.
I think that's where material science would be really, really exciting.
Mm, yep.
Being able to print biodiverse materials that you could use as implants, I can see as being a really important thing, next steps in that technology.
Mm,
At the moment, that printer gets used for making jigs, so printing parts of the body that have, say, occurred damage, so that they can use those prints to make say the titanium plate on before they have to open the body up. So to keep the patient as free from any infection as possible.
mm, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting to see that bridge between science and design and technology all into one
Yeah.
in the coming years. It seems like already have you seen like the work with lattice structures and
Yes.
specific resins to create like movement on a lattice structure? Have you seen like
Oh
Adidas
no, I haven't seen that.
they made like Adidas shoes where when you step it'll propel you forward. The
Oh
lattice
wow.
designed to like compress in a certain direction.
Yep.
And that's all just material science, like creating new ways of setting resin to give it new properties. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops in the future.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. No, I haven't seen that. I'll have to go look it out.
I'll send to you. um,
Thanks.
An interesting topic as well that I've noticed has come up recently is the right to repair, which has always been a big topic. But specifically how organizations have been pushing for development in that area. Have you seen in in Europe how they've released a rule where from I think 2024 onwards, or yeah, I think it's 2024 onwards, all companies that have all products that have a battery in are going to have a removable battery, which is going to be really interesting. Kind of legislation posing new limitations on design, and
Yep.
forcing the industry to take a more I don't know, consumer centric approach to design.
Yeah, and sustainable. Uh, I guess sustainable centric as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh, I think I think possibly the idea of designing something that it can never be pulled apart,
Mm,
be it for repair or for disassembly for say recycling, I think
mm,
is probably erring on bad design. I get it that you don't probably want to pull like having just any old person pulling apart what is maybe a dangerous piece of equipment.
yeah.
But I think as far as having it so that a proper repair center or even down to the point where the consumer could put new batteries
Mm,
into the product, I think there's an importance in having products that last more than just whatever is a deemed cycle of so cars are maybe given a 3 5 year warranty, and once they're past that, people expect things will break.
mm,
um, I think if you can't repair,
mm,
then I think then the design is flawed to a degree, to be honest. Yeah, I think definitely if we want to stop putting stuff in the ground and be able to have like a bit of a build more of a culture of things have a better quality and will last longer.
mm,
I think that's definitely in a right step forward.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what is classified, I mean, I've recently you were on Good Design Australia as judging on Good Design Australia, which is interesting. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, and I suppose you can definitely talk about what is good design. And yeah, in this case, like, we might have even had better designs back in the day. Like when you see an old-fashioned car, it might have been more basic, but it was designed to be serviced. Like you had a massive book of a repair manual that could teach you basically how to repair any part of the
Yeah,
car. Whereas like these days, cars aren't even really designed to be serviced by an individual. They're designed to be serviced by a technician. And even then, some parts can't even be serviced and they have to be replaced. So in a way, it's going back in the design to something that would make
yeah.
it better in the past. Mm,
Well, I think a lot of things come down to the way that it's been manufactured. Sometimes I use my wife's car actually as an issue, as an example.
yep.
It has a plastic water pump housing, which um, effectively hasn't been designed correctly and the plastic doesn't like being heat cycled like a motor gets hot and
Yeah.
cold, and invariably they crack.
Mm,
So even at like the highest levels of the biggest brands, there's still shortfalls in areas where they don't get it right.
yep.
I think if it was to be then unable to be um, repaired,
Mm,
that's obviously if it's like a $50,000 investment into a car, that's not acceptable.
mm,
Um, but I think there's just probably a lot more components that you'll find in, say, electrical products today than maybe products of 50 years ago.
yeah. Yeah.
They may have fulfilled a purpose, may or may not done it as well as they do it now.
Mm,
But I think probably the quantities that are being produced now uh, and the cost effectiveness of say like how much it costs to actually produce each item all comes into play with whether a part is or is not able to be replaced. And there's obviously planned obsolescence and planned I guess failures. So intrinsically you're being forced to buy something new
mm,
because the idea of having products that last for a long time doesn't make for good business,
exactly.
unfortunately. And this is where I think design plays a really important part because some of the best products I've ever. Are you there?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I just cut out again.
So you went some of the best products.
Some of the best products that I've ever owned have been the best designed.
Hmm.
Like my old, nearly 20-year-old Sony Bravia. It was the best thing I could afford, and I loved the design of it, and it's still cracking.
Sometimes I think the whole consumerism mindset that we always need the newest thing, the newest and greatest thing, that's part of the problem. And I mean, but that whole consumer mindset has been put onto us by marketing and all these different.
Yes.
But at the same time, moving away from that and seeing value in keeping a product for 20 years, and that if it's not broke, don't fix it, like the old saying,
Mm.
might be worthwhile to move back to.
Well, I think there's a certain degree of there's certain products where you become connected to it, be it the guitar you've had for 25 years, or the camera that's been around the world with you, or the I think musical instruments like are a product like that, where you sort of have this connection beyond it's just the aesthetic or the function that's that's got you connected to the item.
Hmm.
Um, but I think a lot of like design, well, maybe it's just a design thing, but like an old Braun like product from say 50 years ago,
Hmm.
like people would love to, like you'd love to have that in your say lounge room as a talking piece or something like that. Not necessarily is it doing a great job of anything,
Yeah.
but a good example of I think bad design is say the Philippe Stark um, orange juicer.
Hmm. Yeah.
Juices oranges really poorly. It
Looks
doesn't
great.
collect. Yeah, look, but it looks great. So having lived in a place where we had one of those juices, and I rarely used it because it was such a faff
Was it really?
to
I've never
to
used it.
mess
It's really
around
hard to
with.
use.
Yeah, it's a good example of how, although it's a nice collector's piece to have,
Hmm.
it doesn't do a very good job of what its core
Yeah.
functionality is.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you talk about emotional, like that topic of like sort of emotional design and how we can design products to be more emotionally appealing to us. Like when I think of the products that I use that I have the most emotional attachment to, like I do film photography, and
Yep.
I don't think I have any film cameras around. But yeah, like film photography, for example, like all my cameras are completely manual. Like I don't use like any modern cameras. They all don't even have any electronics in them. And like that emotional connection, the mechanical feedback you get from it. And even
Yeah.
connection to like you take the photo, you get it, you go and get it developed. Like it sounds tedious when you think about it. You could just take a photo on a digital camera, but it's like that emotional connection to the experience of it. And yeah, I suppose experiential design as well, of how we
Yeah.
can design products that aren't necessarily, the best design, but they might have that emotional connection tied into it.
Yeah, well, I think in the music industry, that's to the point where the sound or the authentic sound
Mm.
sometimes comes from like products that are quite old. Like,
Mm.
um, what would be a good example? Like a amplifier that
Mm.
still uses. I think they used to have like really, really like tubes inside, like glass
Yeah.
tubes that would be all a part of the electric.
Mm.
So, and the sound that comes from those is defined as being authentic, say, electric guitar, or
Yeah.
and and people are very reticent to go
Mm.
to new tech
Mm.
because they don't want to spoil what is like the real deal or the real sound that I think is perceived to be the best sound.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think it's funny because I think any like diehard like you with film, me with bike riding and mountain bikes, there's a point where you like almost reject technological
Yeah.
advances and fall back to where you feel design was at its best.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
You're anti-design almost.
Yeah. It's interesting because you think like a no design is perfect, like the classic saying in industrial design. But at the same time,
Mm.
like I would say that some designs I have used are perfect. You know what I mean? And like any evolution from that in some ways has been less perfect. If
Yes.
like for example, I have a 1955 Leica through EF, and it's
Yes.
like German engineering at its finest, like completely mechanical. And like I would say that design is perfect. Like in some ways
Yep.
you could debate it, but for what it did at the time, like it was the beginning of film photography and it like was, pretty great. Like
Mm.
it really get better than that after that. You know what I
Well,
mean?
there was a recently there was a design that came out. I can't remember what the company was called, but it was a grey, like Walkman-esque looking.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I saw that. Like the digital Walkman. Yeah.
yeah, and it had like very tactile buttons, very 80s looking, and it
Mhm.
went viral.
Yeah, but it's like
And
five
it's
grand.
and it's times like that where you just think, like, if we're so in need of the next big thing, how can we get so excited about something that's almost like set us back almost?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Well,
crazy.
there's obviously a part inside of human nature that loves to reminisce in times of old
Hmm.
and reflect on. I think it depends which era you're born in,
Hmm.
but I think, like, say for instance with me, like the mid '90s of mountain biking was like like the time. The
Hmm.
bikes were super basic and everything was really really clunky and didn't really work that well,
Yeah.
but yet it was like a real time
Hmm.
where there was a shift and you could see it in innovation,
Hmm.
but it was also the heyday of the whole, and with that, it was the heyday of the whole industry.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you could see through how the uptake of the actual sport that then design and engineering got a real uptick because of the people just yearning for more tech and new, better, faster,
Hmm.
lighter, more robust products.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting in the future. When maybe we have more brands that come out that aren't necessarily better than anything else. They're just kind of bringing back something that was lost in the past and like design
Yeah,
what the nostalgic products that we want. You know?
yeah, yeah. Nostalgia. I think because people really do love a good kick in nostalgia. I think with design, obviously those iconic designs, and a good example, I think, is how Steve Jobs bought into the Apple calculator, the Braun design in a
Hmm.
digital format,
Yep.
and it was because he's obviously it's like I guess it was a nod to Dieter Rams and his I guess input to design and its importance, that he's gone and put it into the next product, which is almost like a milestone in a period of design.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I thought that was quite. I never even gave it thought, but then I read it somewhere. It was a while back now. But it's like the Apple calculator is the Braun calculator from like the '70s or something.
Yeah, the really nice calculator that costs like way too much money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that is an interesting part. Like, and I think that's where design goes past common sense and just like, I think I read this somewhere. It's a bit of whimsy. It's like a bit of fun to add into the design, and there's nothing wrong with that as well.
And I suppose that's why people get so passionate about design because there's just so many avenues you can go down, and there's design's integrated with engineering history. Like we can look at the history of design and watch its trajectory and its integrated technology. Like it's almost overwhelming how many different fields of design we can go into and how many different pieces of
Mm,
or as you said before, we can sponge this information and just absorb it and go forward.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we might leave it there, John. It was really great to
No, it's been a really nice experience. I appreciate your time.
yeah. We chatted
Um,
the other day, and I know all through I was just like, this should be on the podcast. We should be recording this, So it's good to
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate the offer because this is all new to me, as I sort of said, and I don't know. I feel really excited about industrial design in this region.
yeah.
I guess I've been doing it for like the last 20 years, and I haven't needed to really move too far away from the Hunter region.
Hmm.
And things like the Melt are doing, and other design consultancies locally, they're sort of really, I guess, advocating for how design in like your engineering or in your product or your commercial product areas is important.
Yeah.
And just how positive the outcomes can be if designs put into a product, and then the I guess output is quality products that commercially are successful and that makes humans' lives enriched and better. That's really the outcome of design, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, commercial side of things is important for the bean counters, but I think from a perspective of a designer, to see somebody really love the product that you have, say, poured your thoughts, heart, mind, and soul into is really the probably reward to take away.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, John. And yeah, if anyone would like to reach out, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the description, and I'm sure you'd be willing to chat and build some connections.
Yeah, love to. Thanks
Awesome.
for the opportunity, Roman. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Keep in touch.
See you, mate. Bye.